what they found was that oxygen delivery is the most limiting factor. Not do you smoke, not do you eat well, not do you sleep well. Oxygen was the most limiting factor to longevity. And here's why I want to start too. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Own It Show. I'm your host, Justin Roethlingshoefer, and today we are diving into part 2. So I'm super excited. I know last week we started a new 4-week series that's really going deep into what does it look like for cellular restoration within our health, and really helping us understand that, man, this is what we were built for. This is how we were created. We were created to thrive, created to heal, created to live a life that's different, set apart, and stands out. Ultimately, to live a life that's fulfilled and full of calling. And so if it's your first time here, first time at the Own It Show, it's really what we stand for. We want to educate, equip, and empower you to take ownership of your health so that you can live differently, live a life that's different, live a life of impact that's different, live a life of influence that's different, and leave a legacy that's different. And I think the thing that is so cool is I get messages on Facebook, I get messages on Instagram, I get messages on YouTube, I get messages through different email platforms of just people who have stepped into this, and the transformations are just so cool. Because I've said it before, but I will say it again, that the truth is the only thing that transforms. Everything else is transactional. And what we aim to do here is provide you with the truth, provide you with something that's different, provide you that something that redeems and restores the soul so that you can ultimately experience a life of health and thriving. And if you're with us last week, what you would have heard is that we're going into a 4-week series based on understanding how do you actually transform cellular health? How do you actually redeem and restore your health? Because right now you might be listening to this and going, man, Justin, my health sucks from the sense of I have no energy. I don't sleep well. My back hurts all the time. I'm battling some type of autoimmune disorder. I've just been diagnosed with cancer. My best friend or my husband or my wife or my spouse or my kids have got diabetes, or I've been struggling with my weight for years and nothing seems to work. Well, I'm here to tell you that you can go from the depths of hell in your health to somebody who's thriving and reflecting health in the most abundant way in a 5 to 7 year period. And you might sit back and go, man, 5 to 7 years, that feels like so long. Well, the truth is you're made up of 30 trillion cells. These 30 trillion cells synergistically work together to create the systems that operate and make your health function on a day-to-day basis. Every 84 days, that means just under every 3 months, 500 million of those cells become completely brand new. And thus daily, that means about 10 million of those become completely brand new. So daily, you have an impact and an influence that over the course of time, when stacked, will start to impact so that every 5 to 7 years, you become a completely brand new cellular human being. And depending on if you steward well or if you steward poorly, will determine whether you are thriving or whether you're continually decaying. And so that is what we're aiming for. That is what we're trying to do. That's what we're trying to bring you. And last week we heard that there's 3 things the cells need in order to optimize well, which is oxygen, the ability to detoxify, and nutrients. And based on those, heart rate variability is that number, is that metric that tells us whether our body is adapting well or whether it's not adapting well, whether we are under a state of healing or whether we're under a state of protection. And in a state of healing, our body feels safe. But in a state of protection, our body cannot heal. And so today we're diving deep into the component of oxygen. And when we talk about oxygen, oxygen is unique, right? Because when we think about what happens within oxygen, oxygen is the fuel source for the cell. It is the fuel source that creates ATP. So we think about oxygen. Oxygen is one of those things that I think is so heavily overlooked, because when we think about oxygen, we think about fitness. We think about going to the gym. We think about going for a run. We think about getting on the Peloton. But I want to break it down even deeper, because the 3 things that cells need, we've already heard them, oxygen, detoxification, and nutrients, all governed and looked at and understood by the nervous system, and that language is heart rate variability. And one of the most overlooked but critical components of healing and health and longevity is oxygen. Because specifically, how much oxygen your cells are actually getting, why that matters, and what you can do today to start optimizing it right where you are. And so I want to start at the cellular level, because every single one of your cells needs oxygen to produce ATP. That's your energy currency, basically. And knowing that there's trillions of cells that are requiring this every single day, every single moment, every single second, just in order to function, we have to go, my goodness, this is probably something I should know more about. It's probably not as simple as I can go for a 20-minute run every day and I can be in the best shape and I can be in the best health and I can feel the best and most energy and sleep well and sleep deeply and have the most mental clarity that I could potentially have. There might be actually something deeper, because oxygen is delivered through red blood cells to your mitochondria. And from there, your body generates fuel. So I think a lot of us think that oxygen only has to do with our lungs. I'm going to inhale, I'm going to exhale, I'm going to inhale, I'm going to exhale, and now I just function. That's actually the furthest thing from the truth. And I think that this was an epiphany I had just a couple weeks ago. And as I was breathing and we were doing breath work and kind of running through some of this, I was at a training session, kind of learning a few other things when it came to different breath work and different breath techniques, specifically within the diaphragm. When we breathe, when you take an inhale breath, you actually don't inhale through your lungs. What happens is when you breathe in, your diaphragm flexes, your intercostal muscles flex, your diaphragm drops, your intercostal muscles lift your ribs, and it creates a pressure differential from your lungs to the outside air. And so air rushes in through your nasal passageway or in through your mouth, down through your throat and into the lungs, in which it hits the alveolar sacs. And now you have oxygen exchange between the alveolar sacs. Oxygen then makes its way into your bloodstream, connects to those red blood cells that I talked about, and then make their way into the mitochondria in the cell, which ultimately generates fuel. And so there's a process to this. It's not just, hey, let's go for a run, and the more I run, the better I get. Because without oxygen, you can't heal. Without oxygen, you can't recover. And without oxygen, you can't perform. You can't feel well. And in fact, back in 2016, there was a study. It was in the Frontiers in Psychology journal. What they found was that oxygen delivery is the most limiting factor. Not do you smoke, not do you eat well, not do you sleep well. Oxygen was the most limiting factor to longevity. Not your muscles, not your motivation, not your weight. Oxygen was the most limiting factor to longevity. And so that's what we have to learn, is that oxygen is critical. Oxygen is critical to longevity. Oxygen is critical to being in this space of learning. Oxygen is critical to being in the space of healing, to be in the space of functioning at a high level. But here's the kicker. You can still be breathing fine and still have low intercellular oxygen. Because as I mentioned, it's not just about your lungs. It's about the mitochondria, the cell, the vascular health, the nervous system state, and most importantly, the measurement of oxygen efficiency in the body, VO2 max. A lot of us think that VO2 max is just for athletes. It's something that athletes are constantly looking at. It's something that athletes are constantly getting measured. It's something athletes are constantly being measured against, that they're training for, that they're looking for. We hear it a lot is around Olympic time, talking about how well they're doing. You might look on your Whoop band, you might look on your Oura ring, you might look on your Fitbit, your Polar, your Garmin, and actually see that, hey, I've got a VO2 max number, but I actually don't know what it means. And it's 34, and it says fine, or it says average, or it says good. But what does that mean? And honestly, 34 is not a good number. For men, if you don't have a VO2 max of 45 or greater, women, a VO2 max of 38 or greater, you do not have the oxygen efficiency in your body necessary for you to thrive. In a 2021 study, in the JAMA Cardiology Journal, what they found was that VO2 max is the strongest predictor of all-cause mortality. Stronger than smoking, stronger than hypertension, stronger than high cholesterol, stronger than any high lipid count. It is the number one predictor of all cause mortality. Look at any of Peter Attia's work. That's what he's talking about all the time. You look at Andrew Huberman and a lot of studies he's been citing when it comes to VO2 max. You look at a lot of these health and longevity experts who continue to speak into this. They are just now getting around to VO2 max when we've been sitting here talking about this for decades. Why? Because VO2 max is the measure of oxygen efficiency inside your body. Is the measurement of oxygen efficiency inside your body, and we know how important oxygen is for health and longevity. And so we have to realize is that it is not an athletic performance metric, but rather it's a metric of health span and lifespan. Lifespan being how long you live, how many years you are on this earth. Health span being how many of those are healthy years. And my guess is that the majority of you would want your health span and lifespan to match up almost to the T, because that's my goal. I want you to die young at an old age. And if we're able to increase VO2 max, that is the best way in which we're going to be able to do that. And so I want to give you like a little insight here as to what low oxygen looks like, feels like. Because you might be like, I don't know if I have low oxygen efficiency in my body. Well, number one, how do we measure it? We can go to a track. We can run for 12 minutes as far as we can. Run as far as we can in 12 minutes. Go on a treadmill. You can run as far as you can in 12 minutes. Increase the speed, decrease the speed, but you're going to push yourself. It's going to be very difficult. It's going to be hard. You should be able to cover, for a male, 1.45 miles or greater, and that would put you at a 45 VO2 max or greater. Second, female, 1.18 miles in that same time, 12 minutes. If you are above that, that means you have above 38. If you're below that, it means you're below 38. So that's a really quick and dirty way to be able to get a really rough estimation, and something that you could do monthly to kind of see, hey, is the training exercise that I'm doing working or is it not? Because so many of us just go and train and do exercise and get up in the morning. Instead of investing time training and getting the benefits out of it, we're spending time. And we get frustrated and we're like, man, I'm doing all this work, but I'm not seeing any results. Why? Because we're doing the wrong thing. And ultimately, that low oxygen at the cellular level shows up like fatigue that doesn't go away, even though you have longer hours of sleep. Brain fog that just doesn't seem to lift, and a lack of mental clarity. A constant or chronic low heart rate variability. Because remember, your body's now measuring and understanding, hey, I'm not getting the oxygen I need, thus I have stress behind the scenes that I have to adapt to, and because I have that stress, it's now putting me in a position that I have to deal with. Slower recovery from workouts or illness. It's like, man, if you've been having a lingering cold for 3 months, if you've been having a muscle soreness for 3 or more days, and if you're not having a heightened degree or a heightened area of recovery from illness and workouts, there's another sign that your body's trying to communicate to you that, hey, you're not having the level of oxygen efficiency that you need. Chronic inflammation. If you feel puffy all the time, if you feel swollen all the time, you are lacking oxygen. Going back to even as you sleep and you still have fatigue, if you have poor sleep, you look at sleep quality. If you have low states of REM and slow wave sleep as you sleep, these will all show up. And then even emotional dysregulation. If you have anxiety, if you have a low resilience to stress, if you have a low tolerance to the things and changes about your day, all of these things are signs that your body is communicating to you that you are not adapting well to or you do not have a high degree of oxygen efficiency. And this is why, again, heart rate variability is that metric I need everybody to know, everybody to love, everybody to understand, so that you can ultimately say, man, if I have a low HRV, one of these 3 things, oxygen, detoxification, or nutrients, is missing, or is not functioning well, or is not running optimally. And the way in which we find it out for oxygen is looking critically at VO2 max, and those are the other symptoms that come along with it. Because when we think about it, oxygen or lack thereof oxygen efficiency is the silent anchor that holds you back. And we often blame the stress, we blame the time, we blame aging or just getting older, but it's actually your cells telling you that you're running out of fuel. It's your cells telling you that I'm not getting the oxygen I need. It's the lifestyle and the habits and the behaviors that you have, the lack of intentionality around a lot of this stuff that's actually holding you back. And this is why so many high-performing people, so many leaders hit a wall. Is they've trained their body, but they haven't optimized the system that delivers the energy. I'm going to say that again because I think a lot of people need to hear that. Is you've trained your body, you go for the runs, you've got the personal trainer, you get on the elliptical, you go on the bike, you lift the weights, but you haven't optimized the system that delivers the energy, which is oxygen. And we have to get intentional. We have to start to understand this at a deeper level in order to create change, because there's a science of VO2 max. And so I want to break it down for you when we actually think about this, because what it actually means, as I've said, it's the measurement of oxygen efficiency. And it helps us understand what we're actually utilizing at every single moment. And so the higher your VO2 max, the better your body is delivering oxygen to your body. The lower is an alert. And so there was a meta-analysis. Basically what meta-analysis means is they take a bunch of different studies. They look at a bunch of different things that are going on. And they want to make sure that they can actually start to understand these at a greater level so that they can ultimately speak into them and to say and be able to take all these studies, bring all their finalized research together, and be able to have a synopsis or a conclusion at the end of this. And so the meta-analysis from the American Journal of Cardiology back in 2020, okay, they took over 200 different studies, and what they concluded is that for each single MET increase in cardiorespiratory fitness, meaning for every increase, 1% increase in VO2 max, it was associated with a 13% decrease in all-cause mortality. I talked to you above about how important it was, that it's the number one metric in predicting all-cause mortality. But with 1% increase in VO2 max, it is associated with a 13% decrease in all-cause mortality. That's huge. I could literally just say that's huge, period. Mic drop, walk out the room. If we don't understand that for 1% increase in cardiorespiratory fitness, that we have a 13% decrease in all-cause mortality, that is huge. Like, done, over, finished. But yet most people never train VO2 max. They don't even know that number. They've left it to the athletes. They've left it to this high-performance number. They only ever get it when the doctor goes, hey, we need to go get a stress test. And the doctor, when they even run the stress test, goes, oh, your heart runs fine. You get into a high heart rate and no chest pain? Oh, I guess you're good. Even though you're 40 pounds overweight and you have hypertension and high cholesterol and are on blood pressure medication, all these things. But we don't train VO2 max. We don't even know what it is. But yet it's the system. It is the metric that's communicating how our body is utilizing oxygen, one of the most important aspects to cellular health. Because what people are doing is they either do too low intensity to challenge the system, or they go too hard too often and they fry their nervous system. People think that their zone 2 training is going for a walk. That's not zone 2 training. Zone 2 training is getting you into 60 to 70% of your max heart rate. We're going to talk about that in a second. And then when people are like, yeah, I did all this interval training, I did Orange Theory, I did all these things, and I did it 4 or 5 times a week, but they're not actually getting into zone 5, which is the VO2 max training zone. They're in no man's land, which is zone 3 and 4. So even though you're sweating, even though you're working, even though you're breathing heavy, even though you're doing your workout, quote unquote, doesn't actually mean you're improving VO2 max, because you're not increasing the efficiency of what it is you're using and how your body is utilizing oxygen. And so after a while, you're going to plateau. After a while, you're going to stop seeing increases. After a while, you're going to start to get fatigued. After a while, you're going to start to feel chronically held back. And so VO2 max lives in the sweet spot of structured intensity and structured recovery. And so I want to give you this real life application. I've talked about this before. So what I want to do is I want to help you increase your intracellular oxygen levels while also increasing VO2 max, even when you're not a professional athlete. This is how we increase longevity. This is how we decrease all-cause mortality. This is how we increase HRV. And so the first thing is breath work, nasal breathing, and CO2 tolerance. And so breathing through your nose increases nitric oxide, which opens airways and improves oxygen uptake. So this could be when you go for your walk, put mouth tape on. Or if you're disciplined enough, just keep your mouth closed and breathe only through your nose. You could practice breath holds after an exhale to increase CO2 tolerance and make your body more efficient at utilizing oxygen. And so, for example, something that we could do is nasal breathe only during your zone 2 cardio. Zone 2 cardio, only do mouth breathing. It's very difficult when you first start. But start with 2 minutes at a time and then breathe normally. 2 minutes at a time, breathe normally over the course of your zone 2 work. Because when you mouth breathe, it signals to your body that you're in panic. When you mouth breathe, it signals to your body that you're in panic. And when you're in panic, you go into fight and flight, and thus you can't actually produce oxygen at a high level. When you breathe through your nose, it signals safety. So you're going to continue to heal even though you're doing your work. So that's going to be the first thing, is breath work. The second thing is going to be making sure you're doing your zone 2 training 180 minutes every single week. I mentioned that above. What that means is it is 60 to 70% of your max heart rate. And so you're going to be like, well, Justin, how do I get my max heart rate? There's two ways. You can either take 220 minus your age, and that will be your estimated max heart rate, and then you do 60 to 70% of that, and that becomes your zone 2 heart rate range. Or during that VO2 max test that I talked about, where you run on a track or a treadmill, you get your highest heart rate recorded during that, assuming that you went all out on that run and that test. And that will be your max heart rate you'll go off of. And every single time you do it, you can start to recalibrate, because you're probably going to get a higher heart rate if you get fitter. So that's the thing that we want to look for. And so zone 2 training, do not confuse this, cannot be done during interval training, cannot be done during your weight training, cannot be done during your circuit training. It is when you are holding a steady state of 60 to 70% of your max heart rate. And what you are going to do is, again, you can combine that with numbers 1 and 2, making sure that you can do your nasal breathing through your zone 2 work. Better you get, the longer you can start to stay there. And that is going to increase VO2 max in an exponential way, because zone 2 training increases cardiac efficiency, your efficiency to be able to pump blood through the heart. Okay, really, really important. So number 1, nasal breathing. Number 2, your zone 2 training, 180 minutes per week. And then number 3 is your VO2 max training intervals, which is zone 5. And you're going to want 30 minutes of that every single week. And what your VO2 max intervals are 90 to 100% of your max heart rate. And that means that you're going to want to do for 30 minutes every single week. You can break that into 5 days of 6 minutes. You can break it into 3 days of 10 minutes. Doesn't matter, but it's short bursts. 35 seconds to 4-minute intervals at high efforts with full recovery in between. I can't mention that enough. Full recovery in between, because you want to be able to push yourself into that high heart rate zone. And what it does is it improves the upper range of your cardiorespiratory capacity, meaning your cardiac output. So it increases the ability for your heart to pump blood. And here's why I want to start to speak into this a little bit, because we went back to how blood, or how oxygen works in the body, right? We inhale air, diaphragm drops, intercostals rise, pleural pressure changes, we intake air, goes to the capillaries go, oxygen gets into the red blood cell through hemoglobin is carried to the cell absorbs into the mitochondria converts to ATP, and now all of a sudden you have energy. That's what oxygen is doing. When we think about this for a second, if all of a sudden the only thing that carries blood through the body is hemoglobin, red blood cells. If we're increasing cardiac output, so meaning a big pump of blood, we're increasing oxygen efficiency, meaning the body has to work not as hard to pump more blood. Do you think a higher VO2 max is going to be better or worse for the stress in your body? Of course it's going to be better. Of course it's going to be improved. Of course it's going to decrease stress. And so these are the things that we really want to make sure that we are doing, is that we are leaning in this way. And then the last thing we want to make sure we're doing is we're getting our strength training in. And strength training, we're talking about cardiovascular aspects, is usually not something we think about. But in this case, the reason it matters is because muscle growth and lean muscle tissue is the greatest mover of blood through the body. And so if we increase muscle tissue, we increase oxygen efficiency, because we move blood at a faster rate and a faster pace. So these are super critical. The last thing that we can start to think about is really making sure that we're eating for VO2 max as well. Iron is key for hemoglobin. If you have low iron levels, you're going to have low oxygen delivery, because you don't have the red blood cells to be able to carry it. Your B vitamins and magnesium support. What they do is they help to optimize mitochondrial function, which is where the exchange happens between oxygen and the cell. And then beets, pomegranates, cordyceps, and citrulline naturally boost nitric oxide and oxygen efficiency. It basically means that it moves oxygen through your body at a higher rate. So beets, pomegranate, cordyceps, and citrulline. Citrulline comes in things like melons. And so these are the things that you're going to want to put into your diet that are going to increase oxygen efficiency, simply because it's starting to increase natural nitric oxide, and nitric oxide is critical to VO2 max. And so when we think about this, if you're not testing, you're simply guessing. And so many of you are flying blind. And when we start to understand what VO2 max is in your body, we can start to step into something different and something unique. And so when you optimize oxygen delivery, when you maximize the language of VO2 max, you will increase heart rate variability because it's decreasing stress. You recover faster, you think clearer, you sleep deeper, you age slower, and live with energy that feels earned, not borrowed, because you've done the work. So you're not trying to shortcut your way there. You're not trying to say, oh, I'm going to have a 5-hour energy. I'm going to have an energy drink. I'm going to take a sleeping pill. It is literally one of the lowest hanging fruits in health and longevity that most people completely overlook. Oxygen efficiency, because it's not just about exercise and fitness. It is about oxygen delivery, the key, most important thing. Jesus said he's the breath of life. And I truly believe that if we come back to oxygen, and the reason why oxygen matters is it can have such a massive lasting impact on us. And so I want to ask yourself, are you just breathing, or are your cells fully alive? Are you just living and taking in breaths every single day? Or are you truly having the ability that your cells are like, thank you, I'm actually breathing? Because champions don't leave energy on the table. They truly own it. They own every aspect. They realize that true cellular health is a process. We were created to heal. We were created to thrive. We know this, and oxygen at the cellular level is step number one. If oxygen increases, HRV increases, cellular health increases, and so does your capacity. And so I need you to breathe deeper. I need you to train smarter. I need you to train intentionally. And remember that healing and health start where oxygen meets the cell. And so if this episode resonated with you, I want you to send this to someone who's burning out and needs to get back in alignment. I want you to leave a review or subscribe, and check the links in the show notes for the resources to test your VO2 max and cellular health, so that we can ultimately help you take ownership of your health and step into that next opportunity for you. Because next week we're diving into detoxification, and what does detoxification mean and look like within this of the cellular health as well, and impact on heart rate variability. And so this is what I need you to step into. Oxygen is the critical key to life, and I want you to ultimately have the key that unlocks everything that is holding you back. Because God's created you for a purpose. He's created you for a reason. And if He's the breath of life, then we have to ultimately steward our body differently so that we can breathe it in daily. We know success is different, so own your different. I will see you guys next week.